Good morning, everyone, and very much welcome to another Flash Friday. Very much looking forward to diving into the developments in the fintech and insurtech world. Of course, we should especially mention today, as we're going to talk much more about that everything that's going on in insurance today. I'm very happy that we've got a very nice guest today, somewhat out of the ordinary, perhaps not the starter of a fintech company, but actually the manager of a complete insurance ecosystem. Roger, good morning. I'm very grateful that you could join us this morning.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for having us.
It's really nice to get you here. Roger Peverelli is one of the co-founders of the Digital Insurance Agenda ecosystem, which is a large event and ecosystem for people in digital insurance. Roger, tell me a bit about your background and how did you end up actually in the insurance world?
Well, I used to be a strategy consultant, digital strategies, thinking new business models based on everything that you could do with new technologies. I did it as a partner for a consultancy firm. 3 years ago, we sold the company to EY. I left the day after. But already in the days that I worked in consultancy, I experienced that, for instance, in banking, we saw that they were using fintechs quite a lot and quite extensively and quite fast, moving things to scale very rapidly. And we saw that lacking in insurance. So my passion is to bring innovation to the financial services world. That's what I've done throughout my career, also in writing books and giving lectures. But that's my real passion. So we thought, okay, what can we do to bring those two blood types together? How can we connect insurtech leaders with insurance executives? And we did that for the first time in Barcelona. And much to our surprise, that became quite a success. So we took 1 year to think, okay, should we do it again or should it stay a one-off? But then we decided to turn it into a company. And now we organized already 7 DIAs in Munich and in Amsterdam. And the next one is coming up in June, end of June. We have DIA Amsterdam. And I think in the week of Oktoberfest, we'll have another one in Munich.
That's always, of course, a favorable time to go to Munich. That's well chosen. So I think it's really interesting, right? So I think a lot of people are looking forward to get out there again and meet each other, especially after the 2 years of COVID and relatively inward focused. I think for everyone across the board.
Yes, we definitely see that. There's a huge appetite. We're almost sold out in terms of speaking slots. So that's something that we definitely see. But we also see that on the attendee side. And this year especially, we see that over 50% is booked by groups, by teams.
Okay.
So it could be like the digital transformation team that's coming to DIA, or the country management of a certain insurance company, or the guys who are involved in innovation. They all come with a team. So it could be like, on the one hand, they want to get inspired and know what's out there. Having been traveling less over the last 2 years. On the other hand, I think it's also a way to experience something together again. It's about bonding and also meeting new persons again. So the social part is going to be very important, I think, in the coming years.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually a really positive trend, as I very often see that a lot of companies have sort of sourced all the innovation capacity into a couple of people that should take care of the whole organization, right? Well, I think this is, of course, a misconception of how you do innovation, because it's actually everybody's job, and that means that everybody needs to have some kind of idea on what's happening in the world outside. So I think that's definitely very favorable. And so maybe maybe we can capture a little bit about sort of what kind of world we're actually stepping into, right? If we look into the insurance world at the moment, I mean, there's a lot of buzz going on about open finance translating into open insurance as well. Embedded insurance is something that a lot of people are talking about, and at the same time, we see that, of course, AI and the availability of data and alternative data sources making also a big component of, I think, the insurance efforts and innovation that's going on. Yeah, tell me a bit, what kind of things do you see, especially now, that you find interesting?
Well, I think it sort of starts with the discussion that we just had, people traveling less or and now starting to do more, different ways that we look at work and we look at the things that we do at home. And that also reflects in a different way that consumers want to use insurance. Those changes in mobility will definitely reflect in different types of insurances. And that's also what we see taking place at DIA. So we have a number of insurtechs on stage, for instance, that typically address those changes in mobility. We also see that with all the health concerns that we had over the last 2 years, health is becoming more and more a point of interest and a point of awareness of people, which also reflects in a rise of the demand for specific kind of solutions in health and life. That's also something that we see taking place, for instance.
And then do you see that insurance firms are actually moving forward in the chain and actually, per se, actually try not per se basically altering the insurance product, but actually trying to figure out how they can actually help people in staying healthy, right? I think that's much more what's happening at the moment.
Yes, definitely. Well, it works in two ways. I think that on the one hand, you see that they are moving upstream, so to get to do more things in the prevention area, and to get a better feel of what people really care about. So the question behind the insurance question, that's one big trend that we see, and around that is of course the whole ecosystem trend. The other one is the attention to providing also all sorts of care services. So once you're ill, how can we make sure that your patient journey is has much more relief for you as a patient, rather than needing. So, and that also has to do, of course, with how can we lower the entire cost base of health. We've seen what a pressure on the health system can take place in a pandemic, but also with an aging population. And technology plays, of course, a big role in making sure that we are able to lower those costs also as a society.
Yeah,
so
I definitely recognize that from, let's say, sort of a pure medical cost. Let's say, as another one, I think it also resonates a bit with what you were just saying, is that we also see that there's a desire for better services, right? So I can imagine that, for example, within your subscription, you're actually not just, once you're basically wounded, you won't just get a patch on it and you can go on, but they actually want to be taken care of and be taken to a nice place and get well, in a proper place. And so that, do you see that actually people are trying to look at sort of more upgraded services there to actually create much more like a promise of well-being rather than just fixing you when you're broken?
Definitely. And there are some great concepts out there already. Take Decadu from Switzerland, but also take Vitality, the South African concept. We're very. I think these kind of concepts are really the future of insurance. And just with a little imagination, we can think of the same things in home insurance and in car insurance. We already see such initiatives taking place, and I think that's the way to go. And that will, of course, require a sort of a network of providers who will do specific things along that chain, so that the insurer is able to sort of orchestrate a complete set of services to what you mentioned, like give that new added value to customers.
Yeah. And do you see, because, for example, if you talk about car and home insurance, one of the things in any case that pops to mind is more like the embedded insurance kind of trend as well. That, it's very likely that if you actually, for your home insurance or for your car insurance, you might actually not be talking to an insurer directly, but actually talk to your car manufacturer or your utility company, for example, that actually embraces the product and makes it part of a services agreement.
Yeah.
How do you see that trend moving forward?
Oh, that's not going to stop. It's going to accelerate, definitely. It actually started already like 5 years ago. BMW did a first, well, it wasn't really a pilot because they applied it at scale in the UK together with Allianz. And based on the on your driving behavior in the first weeks of driving your new BMW, they were able to give you a much more specific quote. The insurance was already in there, and just with one tap on the iPad that was in the dashboard, you could agree on the new terms for the rest of the year. Tesla then took it over, and we see that now more and more taking place. It is an important trend, not just from a consumer side, but also looking at it from the competitive position of an insurance company, because you're sort of become invisible. And it's just like how payments have become invisible when you purchase something at iTunes or when you take a ride at Uber. You sort of, as a financial service provider, are moving to the back. And that invisibility is, of course, something that you would really need to think of. Okay, to what extent do I want that? Are there other points across the customer journey where I still can show my added value and connect it with my brand?
Yeah.
So these are really new challenges. So it's not just about the product and the way that new services are being offered, much more convenient, seamlessly to customers, but it's also a real change in the competitive landscape.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. You see indeed the same across banking and other financial products as well, where indeed the financially licensed entities are moving backwards in the value chain and becoming much less visible.
Yeah.
While at the same time, you see that they actually would like to move forward and keep on,
of course,
stay in touch with their customer.
Yeah. So that's
quite a challenge.
It's a challenge, but and that's why I think, for instance, that a concept like what I mentioned, Vitality or Decadu, they are able to, they allow insurance companies to provide that extra value almost on a daily basis and be present in the lives of their customers. And that's really the way to go. But of course, every trend has a counter trend, and then embedded insurance is definitely one of those counter trends. So you need to carefully think, okay, where to place your bets and how to cope with each situation.
Yeah, I recognize that. I think there's for example, across the financial industry, parties are really always looking at big tech, right? On how well they are able to embrace people in their digital environment. And I think that's also one of the challenges, I think, is whether you're actually, when you're a financial license holder, whether you're actually really capable of doing exactly what your customer wants, or whether you're too much occupied with everything you just have to do to be able to keep your license and make your products, which would make you much more of a producer rather than a consumer-oriented service agency.
Yeah.
And I think that really, let's say, asks for a lot of collaboration in this value chain between, all kinds of different roles that could be played for different parties.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it still takes a lot of time to keep up with compliance. It keeps a lot of the budgets busy. And also making sure that there's less attention to what customers actually demand. So you're definitely right in there. Yeah, I see that also taking place.
And I think that's a challenge. And how fast do you think things are moving, right? So I think that's always the challenge. I think generally the rate of innovation is somewhat related to the number of interactions that their customers have with the product. Right. Yeah. So if you look at something daily, your frustrations will pop up much earlier than if you look at something on an annual basis, for example. Where do you see now the pressure to innovate is coming from in the insurance industry? How do you see that's being driven forward?
Well, I think that starts with what you mentioned is an important one. In our view, we're totally on the same page. Contact frequency, that's the key driver for customer engagement. So it doesn't only reflect in bad reviews being spread faster, but also if you have more frequent contact, you're also able to repair things that went wrong much faster as well.
Yeah.
The notion that contact frequency is actually the real economic engine started in banking. Rakuten was the first company in Japan that was really driving everything towards engagement and knowing how to turn that into more loyalty and more revenues. We see that notion picking up in insurance only recently and not with everyone. Many still think that it's a very good idea to keep contact with customers as low as possible in terms of frequency. and are pretty fine with sending just one letter a year. That's the one with the annual premium increase.
Yeah.
Fortunately, there are also others that are really into, okay, how can we engage customers much more, especially those who are busy with all sorts of things in the prevention area and in the care area. Of course, understand that that's the way to really provide added value to customers. But regarding your question, how fast is this development really going? Well, there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is that's really not going fast enough. In our view, we see still too many pilots, proof of concepts. We quite often speak to insurtechs that are frustrated because they were having these meetings with big insurance firms, and at the end of the day, they were just doing like what they call now a pilot safari, basically just testing out things that are not that important for their own business, but just to acquire new knowledge and new skills.
Yeah.
So that's not so good. On the other hand, what we did see is that the whole pandemic also was a wake-up call in the executive boardrooms of many insurance companies. And they understand that there's really no time to hit the snooze button once again. So they are ramping up their efforts to do things structurally. That's also why we see that big digital transformation programs are now really moving forward. And with that also comes the application of insurtech at scale. So not just pilots, not just proof of concepts, but really taking that across organizations. And so that's the good news.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I think also maybe to comment on your pilot safari example, I think it is something that I think has happened a lot, I think, across the financial industry to start with, where, of course, especially the larger the organization and the more IT capacity they have in home, the more their drive would be to figure out, hey, we can build this ourselves, let's try it. But I think in the end, I think people beginning to realize that it's actually not their capacity to build, but actually their capacity to collaborate that will, in the end, determine their success in the future. And that, for example, going into these pilot safaris might actually ruin your brand as being a good partner for the ecosystem and suppliers around you.
Yeah, you're definitely right. That's also what we see. Not that long ago, I went with an AI firm from Spain. And I met with one of the big multinationals, talking to their chief data officer and his team. And they really had a great application of which I knew, and the chief data officer himself as well, that it would be good if this would be applied across that multinational insurance company. Yep. But the members in the team said, okay, yeah, but it's a very nice application, very nice solution, but we can do it ourselves. So then the chief data officer said, okay, but why haven't we done it yet then? And then his second question was, and when could we do that? Where does it fit our calendar? And but that was the only way to get across. People really, basically the not invented here syndrome, right? And
it's understandable. People are of course cautious about their own jobs as well, which is right. So if you're in the IT department and you're supposed to build the IT infrastructure that the company runs on, of course you're wary of external parties trying to do the same thing. But it is indeed on a strategic level, it could really be an hindrance.
Yeah, but I totally agree with what you mentioned. People need to understand that it's not just the capability to build something yourself, but the capability to cooperate with outside parties. That will make the real difference in the coming decade. And that's still something that not everyone fully understands.
No, and that's I think the biggest paradigm shift, that we go from large players that collaborate with a few parties to an ecosystem that consists of thousands of parties that are all somehow intertwined and collaborating one way or the other, which is a really complex game to step into. And you need to start somewhere and just get out there and figure it out.
Yes, exactly. Then of course there's the question, okay, should we do a little pilot? Well, I would say no, just go for it, because it is the way to go anyway. And you need to move forward, because otherwise your competitors will.
Exactly. So I think let's say, our peer group insurance at Holland FinTech is also very, very active in this field, and we have a lot of discussions about these topics as well. And just two topics that also we talk about there are, for example, the environmental challenges, either on the side of ESG, the social responsibility and the ecological responsibility that lies upon insurance firms as well. And I see at least a lot of parties taking responsibilities there. But also the response to climate change, for example, from a risk perspective.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the topics, as well as how to deal with data. But maybe let's first start with sort of the environmental side. How do you see that there? Is it also something that you want to spark the discussion on how people are dealing with these environmental and social issues across the board?
Definitely. We believe that InsurTech allows insurance firms to play a much bigger role in society. And of course, we all know that this important role has always been there. Not just insurance, but also banking. Look at how important it is to finance companies. How important it is to make sure that in case you have an injury that or an illness, that you have proper insurance and proper care. So, but that role for some reason is not like people are very much aware of that. But also in insurance firms themselves, I don't think that people are fully aware of the big role that they play in society. So we launched an initiative, I think it was 3 years ago. We call it the fourth wave of InsurTech. And the fourth wave is all about purpose, the opportunity that InsurTech has to repurpose the whole insurance industry. And we see that not only when it comes to climate and sustainability. We also see that, for instance, when it comes to digital health, what we discussed, making sure that healthcare is still accessible for everyone. We also see that in microinsurance, making sure that people who are now, just like unbankable, uninsurable, and that's like 2/3 of the world population. How can we make sure that when they get ill, they still can keep their house? Or when they face disability in their job, how can we make sure that they don't end up on the street? Because those are the kind of consequences that you have in those kind of emerging countries when you become when you don't have any work. So there's big opportunities there as well. So it's an all array of solutions, and the nice thing is that InsurTech is able to help insurance companies to fulfill that promise and be really a force for good for society. And you're right. Sustainability is one of them. Climate is one of them, and we'll pay ample attention on the conference on DIA in Amsterdam on those subjects, because also I'm personally also fascinated by how we can turn the massive power that insurance firms have to that force of good. And that's something that's too often forgotten and not too often mentioned also in talk shows, etc. If you really want to make a difference, that's really where the power is.
No, and I agree, and I think that's where there's a big responsibility within the financial industry as a whole, as the reach is just enormously, and there's a very strong relationship also to financial inclusion in a larger sense, like you were mentioning as well. We should continuously consider how we keep people or make sure that they stay relatively well catered for within the financial services industry. Even given all the changes that are passing us, right? So I think, a lot of innovation have a very positive effect and are including more people in it. But at the same time, there's always collateral damage. So, for example, if we increase the number of digital services, elderly might, for example, feel excluded or be less comfortable with new solutions. Which means that we have to at least acknowledge that and figure out a way how to cope with that.
Definitely. So, I think that looking at things that take place in the new challenges that we'll have over the next decade, climate is one, waste is another, energy, also like fueled by what's currently taking place in
Yep.
Ukraine, but also water is an issue, poverty, the pandemics that will continue from time to time. So
Yep.
I think there's a lot of things that insurers play a key role in, not solving the issues, but at least making sure that we can all at least cope with it a bit better than we can do today. And that's a role that they can take, and in my opinion, also should take. So
No,
that's
exactly.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the helping customers assess risks and helping them deal with it is probably much more a better way to describe how insurance should move forward, right?
Yeah, I think so too. But there's nothing changes overnight, right? So that's I think
It
that's
always takes some time.
yeah, and I think that like the pandemic was also, of course, useful for that. That the awareness that we got, it really helped us to make a leap when it comes to digitalization, and also to applying data, because that's also one of the things that you mentioned.
Yep.
We definitely see the rise of data, of course, like everyone sees that. We actually created a course together with St. Gallen University, and it's called Insurance Innovation in the Age of Data. And in that course, it's an online executive education course. We'll start again with the second edition end of September, with all sorts of guest lecturers from the insurtech industry. Because we feel that getting the most out of that data is still also something that we still need to learn. We know so much about using the current data that we have, that we're familiar with, the models that we use. But how can we cope with all that new data streams? How does that deliver us new insights? How does those new insights give us new value propositions that we can really deliver on? New technologies that are in place that can help us as well. So there are all sorts of new things that take place that should really fuel innovation. But I think that we're sort of in the stage of you know how the first car looked like. It was like the horseless carriage.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think we're still pretty, and that really was because we didn't have the imagination to think how a car could look like. I think we're sort of still in the same stage, which is not strange, but it just gives an idea that there's still so much opportunities to do new things with new data streams.
Yeah, exactly. I think although we're still in a bit of a challenging period there, where we come from the age of big data, where everyone just wanted to harvest all data they could find, because you'd never know where you could use it for.
Yeah.
To actually the point where we go to talk more about data minimalization strategies, because owning or having access to data is also becoming a liability, especially when you talk about personal information, for example.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think this is also a pretty it's just very strong transition I think that the industry is going through at the moment, to figure out how to make that change, and at some point, for example, to identify risk, to have a large set of data to be able to deal with that, while at the same time being very careful how to manage and keep secure all the information that you actually have about your customers.
Yeah. Well, I think there's also a sense that on the one hand, of course, you can try to gather all the data yourself, and then you probably end up with a lot of data that you won't use. On the other hand, there will also be data that will allow you to create new concepts. But I think that there's already so much data out there. And let me give you a brief example. Think of you being a car insurer, and of course you can gather all the data from cars that are in your portfolio, and the connected car that delivers all that data. But there's already so much data available also at, for instance, leasing firms that know exactly what kind of repairs should take place in what particular after you've driven so many kilometers and things like that. And there's already that data, and if you think creatively about what you as an insurer can do with that data, and this is just one example, there are so many sources out there, then of course you can also use the data sources of others and turn that into something. And I think it ties into where we started this conversation, Don. It's really about creating those partnerships with those other companies who play a role in the ecosystem, who are also a node, just like an insurance company is just a node. And be creative and combine that into new value propositions that deliver new value to customers.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think from that perspective, there's a lot of capability that's available now, becoming in small portions, right? So I think the sort of digital Lego perspective of how financial services in general is evolving makes it available for everyone to build new products in collaboration very easily. And that's the game of the future, right? So everyone just needs to get going and start building.
Definitely. And the best way to get inspired is to visit DIA in Amsterdam, end of June.
That's a nice cue to end with, Roger. So, it's been lovely to talk to you. I'm really looking forward to seeing the people at DIA and enjoying all the inspiration and new connections there. And thank you very much for joining me this morning. It's been great speaking with you.
Thank you for having us, and to all the listeners. I think that at the Holland FinTech site you can also find a discount code for the ones who view this episode. And who want to go to DIA with a 200 extra discount.
Great, thanks, Roger. We're very much looking forward to bringing an audience over and having a good time at the DIA. Indeed, check out Holland FinTech website for more news about the developments in the insurance world, as well as the rest of the financial industry. We're very much looking forward to keeping you up to date, and of course, seeing you in any case next Friday on another Flash Friday. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. See you soon.
Bye-bye.